The first 14 verses of Genesis chapter 22 is one of those stories that is difficult to read or to listen to. After all of this, God tested Abraham, and God said, "Abraham." "Yes," answered Abraham. "Yes, I'm listening." And God said, "Take your dear son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I'll point out to you." So Abraham got up early in the morning and saddled his donkey. He took 2 of his young servants and his son Isaac. He had split wood for the burnt offering. He set out for the place where God directed him, and on the 3rd day he looked up and saw the place in the distance. Abraham told his 2 young servants, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I are going over there to worship. Then we'll come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and gave it to Isaac his son to carry. He carried the flint and the knife. The 2 of them went off together. And Isaac said to Abraham his father, "Father?" "Yes, my son?" "We have flint and wood, but where's the sheep for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "Son, God will see to it that there's a sheep for the burnt offering." And they kept on walking together. They arrived at the place to which God had directed him. Abraham built an altar. He laid out the wood, and then he tied up Isaac and laid him on the wood. Abraham reached out and took the knife to kill his son. Just then, an angel of God called to him out of heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Yes, I'm listening." "Don't lay a hand on that boy. Don't touch him. Now I know how fearlessly you fear God. You didn't hesitate to place your son, your dear son, on the altar for me." Abraham looked up. He saw a ram caught by its horns in the thicket, and Abraham took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham named that place God-Yireh. God sees to it. That's where we get the saying, "On the mountain of God, he sees to it." May we hear this difficult story.
So part of the beauty of our tradition is that we don't have creeds or things that you have to say that you abide by to be a member of this church. And that implies that there are questions that we have one for another, questions about all kinds of things. And so I thought this morning, of all mornings in the middle of summer, when you can get away with stuff that you can't normally get away with in church, hint, hint, we might address some of those questions. So, you say them, and I will repeat them so that people can hear them. After you've just heard this story, what questions have you got? Trust me, I'll answer them all. What questions you got? Why would God ask such a thing? Jim? What would his son think for the rest of his life about what his dad had done? Others? Come on, you've got questions, Nancy. Why does God need to test people? What in the world was God thinking? What in the world was Abraham thinking? It's just a story. There's no wrong answers. You can say things that are funny or serious or questioning, but there's no such thing as a wrong question or a wrong statement. Now go on. This is one of the toughies, Francesca. If God is all knowing and loving, why the need to put Abraham in that position? If it's a story, why such a story? Oh boy. This is going to be better than the sermon. Come on, y'all. Did he tell his wife what he was going to do? No man in the room thought of that question. Thank you very much. Why would a sacrifice please God? Why don't we trust as Abraham did? Why did that have to happen if God already knows what's about to happen? Yeah? All right. Why is there a need for such a story in the Bible? Ask myself about a lot of things that way, especially when it comes up time for that to be on the rotation, right? Others? Why does somebody have to die to show love, or something have to die to show love for God? Karen? What would have happened if Abraham had not taken his son up to Mount Moriah? These are really good questions. You would all get an A in seminary.
Was it a foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Jesus?
Was it a foreshadowing of the sacrifice of Jesus? Interesting. Why wasn't the animal spared? Soliloquy for the ram. Yep. Told you, this is better than the sermon. Your questions are really good. Bill says, so the answer? When am I going to answer the questions? The week after I retire. Yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. What a story. What a story to put in. You know, if you open up that book of the Bible, whether you've got one of those compact versions where the print is super small or one where the print is large and it's a tome, whatever Bible you have, chapter 22 is really early in the book. So here it comes. First thing, you can't miss it. I always wonder about the people who have compiled this book. No one has ever asked me for my version of the Bible. You may be familiar with Thomas Jefferson's rather famous Bible. He took out all the passages, all the stories, all the things that didn't ring true with him. And so it looked like Swiss cheese when he was done with it. He finished up with a Bible that was just the things that he could abide by and follow. That's exactly what my Bible would look like too. If someone asked me to cut out the things that I didn't understand, things that I questioned, things that I wondered over, things that didn't make sense to me. I promise you this story is one of those. Here is this story right up front with Abraham, where we're invited into this conversation and this incredibly strange tale. Most of the questions that you have would be answered off to the sides of the text. And I say that because it's not in there, right? Everything that we talk about is like, well, what if? How come? Why does that have to happen? What happens next? Who did what first? None of that is included in this little story. You can read Genesis 22 for yourself. That's all there is to it, is this one bit. And that's all that there has ever been as far as we know. So we're left to look at this story, scratching our heads, collectively scratching our heads, and trying to understand what is the value of this story. Where is the wisdom in here? Where is the good news in here for me, for heaven's sakes? Because I'm looking above it, below it, around it, and I can't see it. When I get confused about sermons, when I get confused about Scripture, inevitably I take a walk. And I walked a lot this week. So let me tell you where I landed. And I apologize, I'm answering none of your questions. I think that this is a story not to introduce people to Abraham's God, but to help people who are already in relationship with God. In other words, to help the faithful, not to evangelize. And towards that end, I want to invite you to consider the best sermon illustration there is, and that is your own story. So in your own story, in your life, you have experienced something, or likely many things, that are terrible, awful, painful, almost indescribable. Times when you have wondered, where is God in this? Why have you abandoned me? How can there be any good that comes from any of this? And more than once, I have sat down with you at those times, or talking about those times, and I've asked you, would it be helpful if I could pull out the page and read to you the paragraph of why your child died, or why your parent passed away suddenly, or why your spouse had to suffer, or why you have been put through these things, any one of the reasons for the very story that you're thinking of in your head right now. Would it help if I could pull out and read, this is why it happened? No, it would not. It would not help ease your pain or your suffering even a little if I could give you the reason, in air quotes, that it happened. And you know that to be true. And so if you know it to be true that there is no explanation that will help ease your suffering, now we're in a place together to hear this story. Because there's no explanation of how Abraham heard God's voice, of how Abraham, what he thought about as he traveled 3 days with Isaac. There's no way to be able to go through all the machinations of what happened where he was going to sacrifice his only child, one of his 2 sons. Sorry. Nothing would make sense, and nothing would satisfy us. All of our questions. So it becomes a matter of faith. Preachers over the years have used this story 1,000 times to be a study in obedience. Of this is how good Father Abraham is. God said, take your son, 3 days travel, sacrifice him in a burnt offering, and Abraham did it. Now, in our lifetimes, we have seen what blind obedience looks like. And most often in human hands, it is not a pretty thing. So I'm here to tell you that this is not a story about blind obedience. It's a story about faith and relationship. Abraham was deep in relationship with God. God had said to Abraham, go out from your comfort zone, leave town, go out into the wilderness, and I will deliver to you great and wonderful things. And Abraham believed and went. Now, we're at chapter 22 of Genesis. If you read the 10 chapters before, you will find many of Abraham and Sarah's adventures as they were setting out, as they went out to find that promised land. And among the things that they ran into on at least 2 occasions, Abraham would come to another kingdom or another tribe and would pass off his wife Sarah as his sister instead of his wife. And he passed her off as his sister because he was scared about if they thought that they were married, they might kill him in order to get to Sarah. It's important to know God didn't tell Abraham to do that. He came up on that all on his own. So as he was going around the world, he was figuring it out on his own. He was making his own choices, many of which were not the things that God had commanded him to do. So the relationship has not been exactly smooth sailing up to this point. Abraham has gone off and gone rogue a little bit, if you will. And so maybe, just maybe, God has some reason to question Abraham's faithfulness. Maybe God has some reason to question if Abraham would really go all the way with him or not. How faithful is Abraham? Try as I might, I've gone through the story 1,000 times. I can only see one of 2 directions. One is that we have a God who is so power hungry and so evil as to demand human sacrifice and that kind of anxiety. But why would that be the God introduced at the very beginning of the Bible? It negates everything that follows. Or we begin to examine the idea of a God who is in relationship with us and has reason to question that relationship now and again, and tests us. And tests us without knowing the outcome. Because we have free will in this. We get to choose. We get to choose whether we are going to step up and let go or not. We get to choose whether we're going to hold on to everything that we've got because it's right here and I can see it and I can hold it and I can touch it and it's safe and I know it. Or we can choose to let go and step out into the world and follow God. What I'm left with is Abraham's relationship with the divine. Again, I want to go back to your life and think about the relationships that you have that are most important to you. Probably those are with people. And if I ask you about that relationship, are you going to tell me what you think of that person? Or are you going to tell me what you feel about that person? You're going to tell me what you feel about them. Because it's going to reflect the level of trust inside of you. It's going to reflect the relationship that you have with that person. It's going to reflect the trust back and forth that you have with that person. This is what you feel. I have no idea what went through Abraham's mind when apparently so clearly he heard God's voice tell him to take Isaac and to make a burnt offering of him. What I can feel, though, is that Abraham was so deep in this relationship with the divine, he didn't understand it, but he trusted. He couldn't conceive of it, but God had brought him to this point, and he had no choice but to go further in. In Abraham's mind, it had to have been there is either life or life with God. And he could not imagine just life on its own. He could not fathom what that life would look like. And so life with God is what Abraham chose. And Abraham chose that by following the command all the way up just unto the point. I go back to what we started with. Is there any understanding this? No. No, there's not. We're not going to be collectively smarter leaving this service than we were when we came in. Frankly, you may have more questions than you had 10 minutes ago. Okay, good. This is not to be neatly solved and filed away under, well, now I got that one down. Thank you very much. On to the parables. That's not the way this faith thing works. Faith in God is a relationship. And if you don't know it right now, sitting here or watching online, it's only because you are so blessed in this world at this moment in time. You're feeling good. Life is going okay. The world is not collapsing. The sky is not falling. Death is not imminent. Take your pick. Because when those things are happening, that's what you feel. Then you understand this relationship with God, and you will go wherever God commands. No questions asked. Because that is the relationship that you have with your Creator. That is the relationship that you have with your Creator. I don't believe for a second that you're going to be invited to do something so horrific as to kill another human being, much less a member of your family. But I do think that you're going to be invited to let go of that which you hold dear. I do think you're going to be invited to release your death grip on everything in this life that you believe you have collected for yourself and that you have earned and that is rightly yours. I believe that question is coming for us all. How we respond to that question and how we see ourselves after that response says everything about the nature of our faith, our trust, and our Creator. It's the most individual thing I will ever bring to you because this is a question about your story, your faith, your relationship with the divine. Abraham had a choice. What would have happened if he had chosen otherwise and stayed home and said, I'm not doing that? I don't know. That's not in the story. There is no or else with God. There is simply Abraham following through. I am confident, reluctantly, but following through with this faith. Hard, isn't it, friends? This is a tough one. This is a tough one that comes with questions upon questions upon questions. And even as we begin to unpack some of the questions, more come up. Even better ones, even harder ones. That's the nature of our faith. Answered questions leads to certainty. Certainty ain't faith. But we have agency and choices. Ours to make, friends. Ours to make. Amen? Amen.